Have you ever noticed something strange? Most people spend years dreaming about a certain number. Maybe it's $1,000. Maybe it's $10,000. Maybe it's $20,000. They imagine that once they finally reach that amount, everything will feel different. Life will suddenly become easier. Stress will disappear. Money problems will vanish. And they'll finally feel successful. But here's the truth almost nobody talks about. The real transformation doesn't happen when you reach $20,000. The real transformation happens because of who you become on the journey to $20,000. And that's why everything changes even more after you hit that number. Now, before you think this is another motivational speech, stay with me, because what I'm about to share explains why some people reach $20,000 and eventually build real wealth, while others reach the exact same number and end up right back where they started. And the difference has almost nothing to do with money. Imagine two people. Both have exactly $20,000. Same amount, same bank balance, same financial position. Yet 5 years later, one person is worth $500,000, the other is broke again. How is that possible? Because the money was never the most important part. The habits were. The mindset was. The discipline was. The ability to delay gratification was. And those things become incredibly powerful after $20,000. You see, when most people are struggling financially, they're trapped in survival mode. Every bill feels urgent, every expense feels stressful, every emergency feels catastrophic. A flat tire becomes a crisis, a medical bill creates panic, a broken appliance ruins the month. And when you're constantly operating from survival mode, your brain changes. You become focused on immediate problems, short-term thinking, quick solutions, instant relief. Not because you're lazy, not because you're irresponsible, because survival demands it. Your brain is trying to protect you. And that's exactly why so many people stay stuck. They're forced to think about today. They never get the chance to think about 5 years from now. But something fascinating starts happening around the time a person builds meaningful savings. For many people, $20,000 becomes the first time they experience financial breathing room. Not wealth, not luxury, not retirement-level money. Breathing room. And that changes everything, because for the first time in years, maybe even decades, they stop asking, "How am I going to survive this month?" and start asking, "How do I build a better future?" That single shift can completely change the direction of someone's life. Think about it. Every major success begins with a better question. Struggling people ask, "How do I pay this bill?" Growing people ask, "How do I increase my income?" Successful people ask, "How do I make my money work for me?" And wealthy people ask, "How do I create systems that generate wealth without my constant effort?" Each question operates on a completely different level, and reaching $20,000 often creates the space needed to ask those bigger questions. Now, here's where things get really interesting. Most people think financial freedom is about having more money. But in reality, financial freedom starts with having more options. Options are powerful. you're broke, options disappear. You stay in jobs you hate because you need the paycheck. You tolerate situations you dislike because you can't afford change. You delay opportunities because the risk feels too dangerous. Everything becomes limited. But once savings start growing, something incredible happens. Options appear. Suddenly you can wait for a better opportunity. Suddenly you can negotiate. Suddenly you can make decisions based on what's best instead of what's immediately necessary. And that changes the quality of your entire life. Now let me tell you something that shocked me when I first understood it. Most people believe money creates confidence. But often it's the opposite. Confidence creates money. Think about the journey required to save $20,000. You have to make sacrifices. You have to stay disciplined. You have to resist temptation. You have to think long-term. You have to continue when progress feels slow. And every one of those actions builds confidence. Not fake confidence, real confidence. The kind that comes from keeping promises to yourself. The kind that comes from proving you can do difficult things. The kind that changes how you see yourself. Because once you've saved $20,000, you can't honestly tell yourself you're incapable. You've already proven otherwise. And that changes your identity. Most people underestimate how powerful identity really is. Because identity drives behavior. Behavior drives results. Results reinforce identity. It's a cycle, a powerful one. If someone sees themselves as financially irresponsible, they'll make decisions that support that identity. If someone sees themselves as a builder, investor, and wealth creator, they'll make different decisions. And those decisions compound over time. Speaking of compounding, let's talk about the most misunderstood force in personal finance. Compounding doesn't just apply to money. It applies to habits, skills, relationships, knowledge, confidence. Everything compounds. A person who reads 10 pages per day doesn't seem impressive after 1 week. But after 10 years, the difference becomes enormous. A person who invests consistently doesn't seem rich after 1 month. But after 20 years, the results can be life-changing. The same principle applies after $20,000. Because the habits that got you there don't stop working. They continue compounding. And that's why everything changes even more. Not because the number is magical, because the process becomes self-reinforcing. Now here's another thing nobody warns you about. When your finances improve, your perspective changes. You start noticing things you never noticed before. You begin realizing how much advertising is designed to keep people spending. How many purchases are emotional instead of necessary. How often society encourages consumption instead of creation. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. You start asking different questions. Instead of, what can I buy? You start asking, what can I build? Instead of, how can I look rich? You ask, how can I become financially independent? That's a completely different game. And most people never make that transition. That's why wealth remains rare. Now let's talk about time. Because time may actually be more valuable than money. When people are financially stressed, they often sell all their time just to survive. Every hour is committed. Every day is consumed. every week feels rushed. But as financial stability grows, time begins returning. And time creates opportunities. Time allows learning. Time allows planning. Time allows creativity. Time allows growth. That's why many successful people eventually realize they weren't chasing money. They were chasing control over their time. Money was simply the vehicle. And after $20,000, many people get their first taste of that freedom. Not complete freedom, just enough to see what's possible. And once you see what's possible, it's very difficult to go back. Now here's perhaps the biggest surprise of all. Most people think happiness comes from reaching goals, but often happiness comes from making progress. The journey matters more than the destination. That's why so many people reach a financial milestone and immediately create a new goal. Because growth becomes addictive. Progress becomes rewarding. Building becomes exciting. And that's exactly why everything changes after $20,000. Because the number itself isn't the finish line. It's the beginning of a completely different level of thinking. A different level of discipline. A different level of opportunity. A different level of confidence. A different level of freedom. And once someone reaches that stage, they begin understanding something that most people spend their entire lives missing. Wealth isn't about having money. Wealth is about having choices. Wealth is about having options. Wealth is about controlling your future instead of constantly reacting to circumstances. And for many people, $20,000 is the moment they finally begin experiencing what that feels like. That's why everything changes after $20,000. And that's also why everything changes even more after that.